Hello, everyone. Tonight we are not rushing, not scrolling, not skipping. We're just here, still, together. Maybe you're curled up on the couch. Maybe you're lying in bed with the lights turned low. Maybe, just maybe, you're listening because something in you wants to feel a little less alone tonight. And I want you to know you're in the right place. Because what I'm about to share with you, it's not just a story, it's a memory, a scar. A truth that I've carried quietly for far too long. It begins with fire. The kind of fire that doesn't just take your home, it takes your history, your comfort, your plans. One moment, I was drinking tea by the window. The next, sirens, smoke, and the sound of everything I owned, cracking, burning, falling. I stood outside, barefoot, watching my life turn into ash. No keys, no suitcase, just me, and nowhere to go. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And comment where you're watching from, the city, the time, the weather outside, because I love seeing how far a story can travel. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan. Let it hum softly in the background like a heartbeat. And let's begin our journey tonight. I didn't have a plan. Standing there on the sidewalk, soot on my sleeves, my phone barely charged, no shoes, no wallet. I realized how quickly life can slip beneath your feet. And in that moment, I did what most of us would do. I opened my contacts and scrolled until I found a familiar name. Daniel. We hadn't spoken in a while. Old college friends. Used to laugh for hours, share takeout, stay up late talking about our big dreams. We'd drifted, like most people do, as life pulled us in different directions. But even after the years, I remembered his kindness, his honesty, and how, back then, he always picked up when I called. So I called, and this time, he picked up again. "Come stay with us," he said. No hesitation. No questions about what I'd lost, just a warm voice and an offer that felt like hope. I remember standing in front of his house that same night. It was larger than I remembered, nicer than I expected. The porch lights glowed like a welcome sign, but I couldn't ignore the knot in my stomach. Why was I nervous? Maybe it was pride, maybe it was shame, or maybe it was something else, something deeper, a whisper I didn't yet understand. He opened the door with a smile, like nothing had changed. Same laugh, same warmth, same old Daniel. And when he pulled me into a hug, I felt a flicker of relief. I was safe. Or, at least, that's what I told myself. Because that night, as I laid in the guest room, watching shadows crawl across the ceiling, I couldn't sleep. Something didn't feel right. I just didn't know yet that this house would hold more secrets than I was ready to find. From the outside, the house looked perfect. Cream siding, trimmed hedges, a little wind chime near the door that sang whenever the breeze moved through. But inside, it felt too quiet, too controlled, like the house was trying not to breathe. Daniel gave me the tour, showed me the guest room, small but cozy, told me I could stay as long as I needed, made a few jokes about old times, and then disappeared down the hall. I unpacked the few things I had. My phone charger, a shirt someone from the shelter gave me, a half-melted lip balm I'd shoved in my pocket the night of the fire. And then, I noticed something, the door across the hall. It was closed. No name, no sound, just closed. I didn't think much of it, until I went to the kitchen later that night. That's when I saw her, a woman, long hair, tired eyes. She stood by the sink, washing a single mug. Not two, not three, just one. She glanced at me, and I smiled. She didn't smile back. I cleared my throat. "Hi, But before I could finish, Daniel walked in. "Hey, you met Leah." His tone was light, too light. "She's just shy." Leah nodded, once, then dried the mug and walked away without a word. That night at dinner, she barely spoke. Daniel did all the talking, laughing, reminiscing, asking about old college friends I hadn't seen in years. Leah sat there, cutting her food into tiny pieces, but barely eating. Every time I looked at her, she looked like someone holding something in, like a balloon stretched too tight. I tried to tell myself it was awkwardness, a guest in her home. Maybe she wasn't used to sharing space, but when I passed her in the hallway later, she flinched. Just slightly, barely enough to notice. But I noticed. And once you notice something like that, you can't unsee it. The house looked beautiful, but it didn't feel like a home, and I was starting to wonder, who was the real stranger here? The next few days were quiet. Unnaturally quiet. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that hums under your skin, like the stillness before a storm. Daniel left early each morning, said he was consulting again, some startup across town. He'd smile, pat me on the back, and disappear out the door like a man without worries. Leah stayed. We shared the same house, but barely crossed paths. And when we did, her eyes darted, like she was waiting for something, or hiding from it. There was something else, too, doors that stayed locked, a room upstairs I wasn't allowed in. The office, Daniel had said. Lots of expensive equipment, you understand. I nodded, but something in his voice made me pause. One afternoon, I came back from a short walk, just to get fresh air, and heard voices upstairs, muffled, urgent. I stopped at the bottom step, held my breath. "She's here. You said it was fine." Leah's voice, barely audible, tight. I said I've got it under control. Daniel, cold, unfamiliar. Then, footsteps. I scrambled back into the kitchen, grabbed a glass I didn't need, and filled it slowly from the tap as Daniel entered the room, smiling. Too wide. "Everything good?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied, lifting the glass with a hand that wasn't steady. Later that evening, I sat on the edge of my bed, watching the hallway through a crack in the door. The house was dim. Too many lights off. Too much silence pressing in. That's when I saw it. Leah, standing outside the office, her hand on the doorknob, her body frozen, like she wanted to open it, but couldn't. She stayed there for a long moment, then turned and walked away. That image stuck with me. What was she afraid of? What was behind that door? And more importantly, why did I feel like I wasn't just a guest here? Why did I feel like a piece in someone else's plan? It happened on a Wednesday night. One of those nights where sleep doesn't come easily, when the air feels too thick and the blankets feel like they're pressing you down instead of warming you up. The house was still, not quiet. Still. The kind of still where you can hear everything, every creak of the walls, every shift in the floorboards. I was lying there, staring at the ceiling again, when I heard it. A sound, software muffled, but clear enough to stop my breath. Crying, not loud, not dramatic, just broken. I sat up slowly, swung my feet to the floor. It was coming from down the hall, behind that same closed door. Not the office, the other one, the one no one ever talked about. I crept into the hallway, my heartbeat too loud in my ears. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, I just couldn't walk away. I stood near the door, barely breathing, and listened. The crying stopped. Silence. Then a whisper. One word. "Please." That was it. Just please. I froze. My hand reached for the knob, but stopped halfway. What would I say? Who was even in there? Why didn't anyone tell me? Suddenly, footsteps, fast, down the stairs. I rushed back into my room, closed the door gently, and stood behind it, heart pounding. The footsteps passed. No knock, no voice, just silence again. The next morning, at breakfast, Daniel was cheerful, too cheerful, flipping pancakes like a dad in a sitcom. Leah sat across the table, her eyes darker than usual, her sleeves longer. And when I asked, "Hey, did someone have a rough night last night?" she flinched. Daniel cut in, laughing too loud. "Old pipes," he said. "They make the weirdest noises." I nodded slowly, playing along, But in my chest, something shifted. That wasn't a pipe. That was a person, in pain, trapped behind a door in a house that felt less and less like shelter. And I had a sinking feeling that the longer I stayed, the closer I was getting to something I wasn't meant to see. I told myself not to snoop. I really did. Tried to convince myself I was imagining things, the voices, the crying, the strange behavior. But when your instincts whisper and don't stop whispering, you either listen or you become part of the problem. That morning, Daniel left early again. Leah barely acknowledged me. She'd taken to wearing headphones around the house, like she was trying to shut the world out. I stayed behind, alone. Just me and the quiet. And that's when it happened. I went into the hallway, not looking for anything, just following the tension. The air outside the closed room still felt heavy. The door was locked. Of course it was. But the hallway table nearby caught my eye. Stacked mail, messy papers, a few pens. Nothing unusual. Until something slipped out when I opened the drawer. It wasn't even fully hidden, just tucked between an old notebook and a phone charger. A torn envelope. My name on the front. In Daniel's handwriting. But I'd never seen it before. I unfolded the contents with shaky hands. Only part of the letter remained, ripped, faded. Just a few lines. Incomplete. But chilling. She still doesn't know what we did. Don't say anything yet. Wait until she's settled in. We'll decide later what to tell her. My breath caught. Who were they talking about? Me? What they did? What hadn't I been told? I stared at those lines for a long time, my fingers trembling, mind racing. I wanted to believe it was old, a misunderstanding. Maybe it wasn't even about me, but it was. I knew it. Because the signature at the bottom, half visible under the tear, was mine. Copied. Traced. I hadn't written this letter, but my name was at the bottom, and that's when I realized this wasn't just a strange house. I wasn't just an inconvenient guest. I was part of something I didn't understand, and maybe was never meant to. I put the letter back, closed the drawer slowly, listened for footsteps. Nothing. But from that moment on, my mind was no longer foggy. I was awake, alert. And more than anything, I wanted answers, even if I wasn't ready for them. That night, Leah knocked on my door. It was the first time she had. No words, just a soft knock. Then silence. I opened it slowly. She stood there in her oversized sweater, arms crossed tight across her chest. Eyes red, not from crying recently, but from crying too often. We stared at each other for a long second. Then she whispered, "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She sat at the edge of the bed, but her body never relaxed, still clenched, like someone bracing for impact, even in safety. "I saw you," she said, her voice barely carried. "You read the letter." I froze. I didn't deny it. There was no point. "I didn't understand it," I told her, which wasn't entirely true. I understood enough to know there were lies and plans, and my name was in the middle of them. Leah nodded. Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me. She leaned forward, her voice barely more than breath. "I can't say much. Not yet. But you're not crazy. You're not imagining things." My heart was pounding. I waited for her to continue. She didn't. She stood up, walked to the window, and stared out into the darkness. Then she whispered, "He didn't just invite you to help you. He wanted something." "What?" I asked, my throat dry. She hesitated, then turned, and her face was pale. "You were chosen," she said, "not just helped." That word, chosen, chilled me, like I was a puzzle piece someone had been saving for just the right moment. "Chosen for what?" I asked. But Leah shook her head. "I can't. Not yet. He checks things. He knows what we say." My skin crawled. I looked at the ceiling, the walls, the outlets. Was someone listening? Watching? "Why are you telling me this now?" I whispered, Because you need to be ready, she said. Her eyes were fierce now, not scared, focused. He'll pretend nothing's wrong. He'll smile. He'll cook. He'll offer to drive you places. But everything he does, it's part of something bigger. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the knob. Then, softly, she added, "Don't trust what he says. Don't trust what you feel in this house. And when the time comes, you'll know what to do." Then she left, and I sat there, my pulse thudding like thunder in my ears, realizing I was deeper in this than I ever imagined. And the worst part? I had no idea what I was being prepared for. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. I really did. But every time I closed my eyes, Leah's words echoed in the silence. "You were chosen." He checks things. When the time comes, chosen for what? By morning, I had made a decision. I couldn't keep living in fear. I had to see what was being kept from me. And that meant going into the one room I'd been told, gently, smilingly, but firmly, to avoid. Daniel's office. It was always locked, always. But people make mistakes, especially when they get comfortable or overconfident. And that morning, Daniel did. He left in a hurry, phone to his ear, briefcase in hand, his coffee still steaming on the table, and his keys on the counter. My hand hovered above them, heart pounding like a drum in my throat. One decision, one motion, and I'd crossed the line from guest to something else. I grabbed them, walked to the door. Key slid in, turned. Click. The door opened, and the moment it did, I knew. I wasn't just breaking a rule. I was opening a vault to something I wasn't meant to see. Inside, everything was neat, organized, too organized, folders labeled with names I didn't recognize, spreadsheets on the monitor, a corkboard covered in photos, faces with red thread linking them in patterns I didn't understand. Until I saw mine, in the center, my picture from years ago, college, the day of our graduation, smiling, unaware. Lines connected me to other people, some I knew, some I didn't. One folder was already halfway open, my name on the tab. I pulled it out, hands trembling. Inside, copies of old leases, bank records, emails I hadn't written, signed documents with my forged signature, every piece of my life cataloged, controlled, manipulated. And in the back, a single page, typed, plain, titled Phase 2. But before I could read it, a voice, behind me. "You weren't supposed to see that." I turned. Daniel, in the doorway, not smiling, not joking, just staring, still, cold, and quiet. I didn't say anything, couldn't. My mouth was dry. My fingers still clutched the folder. Daniel stepped into the room slowly, closed the door behind him, softly, like sealing a vault. And then, he smiled. Not the kind that reaches the eyes, not the kind you give a friend. This smile was calculated, cold, like a mask sliding into place. "You must be so confused," he said. His tone was light, but everything in me screamed. I took a step back. He took one forward. "You went looking," he continued, "because you couldn't help yourself." He gestured around the room. "All of this, it's just paperwork, old files. Out of context, it looks bad, but it's not what you think." I didn't believe him, and he knew it. His smile faded. "You should have waited. You weren't ready yet." "Ready for what?" I whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the desk, took the folder gently from my hand, as if he were helping me clean up a spill. "You came to me broken," he said. "Vulnerable. I gave you shelter, food, a second chance." He placed the folder on the desk, smoothed it flat. "And now you're treating me like a villain in some thriller. That's not fair." His voice dropped lower. Not angry, just disappointed. Like a teacher scolding a child. "I was trying to help you, reshape your life, not trap you." But the evidence said otherwise. My name, the signatures, the photos, the lies. "Why was I chosen?" I asked, forcing the words through clenched teeth. He looked at me then, truly looked, and for a moment, his eyes softened. "You were supposed to be part of something better," he said, "but now, you've complicated things." I backed toward the door, fumbled for the knob. My heart was racing. Every instinct screamed, "Get out!" He didn't try to stop me, he just watched, like he was waiting to see what I'd do now that the mask had slipped. I opened the door, ran to my room, locked it behind me, threw everything I had into a bag, which wasn't much. Every second, I expected to hear footsteps, a knock, a voice, but there was nothing, just silence. I slipped out the side door, onto the street, away from the house that had never truly been safe. But as I walked, shaking, one thought looped in my mind. I got out. But was it already too late? I didn't stop walking, not for blocks, not even when my legs burned and my bag felt heavier with every step. I didn't know where I was going, only where I couldn't go back to. Eventually, I made it to a small all-night cafe. I slipped into a corner booth, ordered a tea I wouldn't drink, and tried to breathe. What just happened? I pulled out my phone. No missed calls, no messages. But part of me wondered if Daniel would even need a phone to find me again. Then, a vibration. A new message. From a number I didn't recognize. "Are you safe?" No name. But I knew who it was. "Leah." I typed back, "I'm out. What do I need to know?" The reply came fast. "You were part of a pattern. You weren't the first. You wouldn't have been the last." I stared at those words. My stomach turned. "What pattern?" She paused before replying. "He finds people who are vulnerable, people who won't be missed. He creates dependency, then takes over their lives, slowly, their names, finances, history, replaces them with something he can control, not just to hurt them, to build something for himself." My pulse pounded. It felt impossible, like something out of a movie. But the truth was, sitting in a folder on a desk, in a room I'd never be allowed in again. "Why didn't you leave?" I asked. The answer came back, and it chilled me. "Because I didn't find that letter. You did." I leaned back in the booth. Everything suddenly made sense. The way she watched me, the way she waited. She had been waiting for me to figure it out, because she couldn't. But now that I had, I knew I couldn't just disappear. I opened a new note on my phone, began typing, every detail I could remember, every name, every lie. Then I opened a new email, attached the file, sent it to myself, to 2 friends from college, and to a lawyer's office I found online. Just in case. If something happened to me, they'd know. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just about me anymore. If what Leah said was true, there were others. People who never got out. People whose names were still on those folders. I couldn't let that be the end of it. I wouldn't. But I couldn't go back alone. Not yet. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days that followed were a blur. A mix of fear, strategy, and slow-burning anger. I stayed in a budget motel under a different name. Leah and I kept our messages short, cryptic. We knew better than to say too much. She warned me. "Daniel's not impulsive. He's calculated. If he hasn't come after you yet, he's building something." I didn't sleep well. I'd wake in the middle of the night, certain someone had knocked, that someone was watching. But it was always just silence, tense, heavy. The more I thought about it, the more things clicked into place. How Daniel had found me right when I was most vulnerable. How easily he had inserted himself, not as a friend, but as a solution. He hadn't just offered me a place to stay. He had orchestrated that fire. I didn't want to believe it at first. It felt too cruel, too cinematic. But Leah sent me a link, a news article. Suspicious electrical fire under investigation. Apartment building had been reported for faulty wiring. Anonymously. Anonymous. 3 weeks before the fire. Someone had tipped them off. And nothing had been done. Because the report had vanished. Buried. By someone who knew how to make things disappear. My blood ran cold. I remembered the smell of smoke, the way my door stuck right before I got out. I thought it had been luck that I survived. Now I wasn't so sure. And the most chilling part? He didn't want me dead. He wanted me alive. Alive, grateful, isolated, and easy to mold. Leah told me more in pieces. There had been others. One of them, Darren, had vanished last year. No trace. No friends who remembered him. Just a note left behind, typed, too clean. No one questioned it, because Daniel's entire system was built on trust, charisma, his ability to look like the hero. I wasn't the only one, but I might be the only one who got far enough to fight back. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I started making calls. To people I hadn't talked to in years. To lawyers, reporters, even AP, who owed a favor to my late uncle. I gathered everything, dates, photos, screenshots, recorded Leah's voice with her consent, saved files on hard drives, sent backups to friends, and finally, I called someone I knew Daniel couldn't manipulate, his older brother, someone who hadn't spoken to him in a decade, someone who knew the darkness Daniel came from, and someone who, after I shared everything, said 5 simple words. I believe you. I'm in. The web was tightening, but not around me, not anymore. This time, Daniel was the one being watched. I thought leaving would end it, that getting out of the house meant I was safe. But I was wrong. Because Daniel wasn't done. He didn't storm into my motel, didn't yell, threaten, or chase me down. Number Daniel was smarter than that, more dangerous. He reached out, with kindness, with guilt, with perfect poisonous charm. It started with a message. I'm sorry if I scared you. Let's talk? Then another. You misunderstood everything. I was trying to help you, like I always have. And then, a delivery. To the front desk of the motel. A care package. Inside, a sweater I thought I'd lost in the fire. My favorite tea, a flash drive. I didn't open it. Didn't plug it in. I knew better. But it shook me. He was still reaching in. Still inside my world. Even when I was out of his. I called Leah, told her what he'd done. She didn't sound surprised. He doesn't let go, she said. He rewrites the story until you believe his version. And that's when I realized. The danger wasn't just in his presence. It was in his absence. His ability to haunt you with words that sounded like care, but were rooted in control. He had kept me in his house, yes. But worse, he had tried to keep me in his narrative, the kind where I was lucky to be chosen, the kind where I owed him everything, the kind where my fear was just confusion. I started seeing the cracks more clearly. The gifts, leverage, the messages, bait. The flash drive, a trigger, a way to pull me back in. I threw it out, blocked the number. But still, I looked over my shoulder every time I left the room. Every knock made me tense. Every unfamiliar car parked outside felt like a signal. He wasn't chasing me. He was lingering, like a shadow, like smoke, thinning but not gone. That's when I knew escape wasn't enough. I couldn't just run. I had to take back the narrative, my voice, my truth. And I had to make sure he couldn't do this to anyone else. So I made a choice. A scary one, a loud one. I reached out to a journalist known for covering stories about hidden abuse, manipulation, psychological control. We met in a crowded cafe. I slid her a folder with everything and told her everything. And when I saw her face go still, heard her say, "This needs to be told," I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Relief and power. Because Daniel could twist stories in private. But now, his secrets were about to go public. Taking back control wasn't a single moment. It was a series of tiny, trembling choices, each one harder than the last. Telling the journalist was the first real step. But what came next was facing the people Daniel had already wounded. Leah and I compiled names, photos we'd seen on his corkboard, cross-referenced dates, emails, clues. She remembered faces, a woman named April, a man called James, and one other we were sure had vanished completely. I tracked them down. Social media, old college alumni boards, public records. Some didn't respond. Some blocked me. But a few picked up. Hesitantly. And one by one, their voices began to shape a pattern. A terrifying one. Daniel had done this before. More than once. Offered shelter, a place to land. But with each person, the story was the same. Isolation, manipulation, control masked as kindness. He didn't scream. He didn't hurt physically. He designed their lives until they no longer recognized them as their own. One of them, April, shared something I'll never forget. She said, "By the time I realized what he was doing, I didn't even trust my own memories. I thought he was the only one telling me the truth." That stuck with me, because I had felt that too. The gaslighting, the confusion, the guilt for feeling unsafe around someone who claimed to have saved you. And now, we had a group. A handful of people, slowly reconnecting, finding strength in each other's stories. I started a digital archive. Every testimony, every message, every record we could find. Locked behind encryption, backed up twice. We called ourselves the Rewritten, a quiet name, because we had all been turned into versions of ourselves we didn't write, didn't choose, didn't consent to. We were tired of being side characters in Daniel's story. It was time to flip the script. When the journalist published her first piece, it was quiet. Soft headline, no names, just a story about coercive environments disguised as help. But then came the comments, the shares, the whispers. Others started to come forward, not just from Daniel's circle, but other people in other towns with their own versions of him. The story grew. And Daniel? He stayed silent. Too silent, which only confirmed what we already knew. He was watching, waiting. But this time, we were the ones holding the pen. And we weren't afraid to write the ending he never saw coming. It happened on a gray Thursday. The sky was heavy. The air smelled like rain, but nothing fell. I got the call just after noon. A calm voice. Professional, clipped. It belonged to Detective Ramos. "We'd like to speak with you about a Mr. Daniel Ellery," she said. Not accusatory, not urgent, but final. I met them at the station, sat in a small room that smelled of coffee and cold metal. And for the first time, I told everything. No trembling, no hesitations. Just the truth, laid out in sequence. They listened, took notes, asked careful questions. But it wasn't just about me anymore. They had other reports, other files. Things I didn't know had already been sent in. The journalist's article had sparked more than whispers. It had opened a door that Daniel could no longer keep closed. Detective Ramos slid a folder toward me. Inside were photos, documents, copies of forged paperwork with my name, April's, James, all altered, all linked back to one IP, one bank account, one man. It was enough. Enough to freeze his assets, enough to issue a warrant, enough to finally pull back the mask he'd worn so well. That night, he was arrested quietly, in his home. No drama, no sirens. Just a clean break in the narrative he'd tried so hard to control. I got the text from Leah. "He's gone. They took him." I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I sat in my motel room, listening to the hum of the AC, and for the first time in weeks, I exhaled. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't victory. It was stillness. A soft, quiet knowing that I was no longer under someone else's shadow. Later that week, I met with Leah in a little park filled with children and wind chimes. She brought sandwiches. I brought nothing but gratitude. We sat beneath a tree, watched a squirrel dart between leaves, and talked like people who knew what it meant to survive without closure, but to find peace anyway. "I didn't think it would end," she said. I nodded. Sometimes, you have to write your own ending. And in that moment, as birds chirped and the light turned golden behind the trees, I realized something. The story wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone who ever felt silenced, small, erased. And telling it, honestly, bravely, wasn't just survival. It was defiance. I had been a guest in his house, but now I was home, in myself, in my truth, in my voice, and he could never take that again. The house is long gone now. Leah moved out first, found a quiet little place by the coast, close to the water, where the air smells like salt and the wind always sounds like freedom. I followed eventually, not to the coast, but to a modest apartment with windows that catch the morning light and floors that creak honestly beneath my feet. There are no hidden rooms here, no closed doors, no silence that suffocates, just space, to breathe, to rest, to rebuild. Some days, it all feels distant, like a story that happened to someone else, a bad dream that fades in the morning. But then I look in the mirror and I remember, I lived this. I survived a trap wrapped in kindness. I questioned my instincts, doubted my worth, and almost gave away the most valuable thing I had, my voice. But I found it again, through the whispers of another woman brave enough to speak, through strangers who carried scars shaped like mine, through the truth that refused to stay buried. Daniel wasn't just one man. He was a mirror of the control people exert through charm, through dependency, through silence. And if this story did anything, I hope it showed you that danger doesn't always look like a threat. Sometimes it looks like a favor, a helping hand, a perfectly timed offer when your world is burning. But real help doesn't come with strings. It doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't lock doors and call it love. To those of you still watching, maybe you've felt this kind of quiet betrayal. Maybe you've seen the signs and wondered if you were just imagining them. You're not. Trust that quiet voice inside you, even if it trembles, even if it doesn't yet make sense. That voice saved me, and it might just save you too. Thank you for sitting with me tonight, for holding this story in your hands, for letting it breathe. If it touched something in you, even a little, I'd be honored if you liked the video, left a comment, or subscribed so we can keep telling these stories together. Because I have more to share, and I want you here with me. For all of it. So until the next story, be gentle with yourself. Watch the way people hold your name, and never stop listening to the quiet truths inside you. Good night.